forward the two representatives from the Brownfields Economic Redevelopment Initiative, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We're honored to have Carol Browner, who's the administrator here today, along with Duane Jones, Executive Director of the Young Community Developers Incorporated.
To my colleagues, I've testified probably more than 100 times before Congress, and I am more nervous appearing before you today than I ever have been before a congressional committee. I am here on behalf of my colleagues at the Environmental Protection Agency. EPA's Brownfield program at its core is about people. It is about revitalizing communities, creating quality jobs that guarantee our futures. It is about safe, healthy neighborhoods for families, and it is about making government better for its people. In my experience, one of the greatest challenges for government is to recognize when an otherwise successful program brings with it unintended consequences. Almost 8 years ago, EPA heard from communities across the country who told us that abandoned industrial sites were being left fallow because businesses and governments feared Superfund liability. As a result, neighborhoods were deteriorating, jobs were being lost. In response, EPA created the Brownfields program. Without a single new law, without a single new rule, EPA has given states, local governments, and communities the flexible tools they need to solve their problems on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood, job-by-job basis. The program was built on the fundamental premise that good government means listening to communities, maintaining flexibility, responding swiftly to emerging challenges, and embracing opportunities when they are presented. It began in 1993 in Cleveland with a site assessment grant to determine the level of contamination at an abandoned industrial site. We found at that site, as we did at many sites across the country, that the contamination was so light, so little, that we could assure businesses, financial institutions, and local governments that they would face no Superfund liability. But that was only a start. Communities next told us that the capital to clean up and develop the sites was in short supply. In response, EPA established the Brownfields Cleanup Revolving Loan Fund, providing grants to governments who in turn loaned the money to private businesses willing to redevelop these properties. Communities next told us that they needed better coordination among all of the federal agencies. In response, EPA formed the Federal Brownfields Partnership, a coalition of 22 federal agencies. And these projects moved forward. But then we encountered yet another problem. Communities determined that they lacked skilled environmental professionals to actually perform the cleanups. In fact, workers frequently had to be brought in. In response, EPA provided grants to train local residents and give them the skills they need to revitalize their own communities while developing quality careers. So what are the results? Well, the numbers speak for themselves. An independent study of 107 sites where we have worked found the projects created 8,300 construction jobs, created or retained another 22,000 jobs. For every $1 invested in public money, $2.48 is leveraged from the private sector. EPA's 36 job training pilot programs have 516 graduates entering quality jobs, some of which now pay more than $30 an hour. Much of this economic revitalization is happening in the areas where it is most needed. Many brownfield communities, the average yearly per capita income is about $10,000. All of these numbers represent real progress for real people, people that you will hear about from Duane Jones. In 1993, none of us at EPA could have imagined that we would expand a modest program from simple site assessment to harnessing market forces to providing financial capital to building valuable job skills to coordinating an unprecedented government-wide program. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Duane Jones, Executive Director of the Young Community Developers in San Francisco, California.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to really try and explain to you exactly why I love my job. The EPA Brownfields Job Training Program has truly reinvented the way employment and training is done in San Francisco. Thanks to the EPA, I've been able to build a program that empowers people and really changes their lives, not in theory, but in actual practice with immediate impact. This program has allowed us to train people in environmental careers so that they can revitalize their own communities. In my community, Bayview Hunters Point, we're surrounded by brownfield sites, base closure, crime, high incidence of cancer and asthma, an unemployment rate of 16%, and an overwhelming mistrust in government. Through this program, we've been able to empower people so that they have trust in government. Case in point, Tiffany Reed, a 23-year-old single mother, came to our program with no health benefits and an asthmatic child. She was earning $7 at that particular time. Upon graduation, we placed her in a job earning $33.10 an hour. She now has health care and a new life. Another case in point, an ex-criminal, Joseph Broussard, came to our program. Upon completion, we placed him in a job earning $28 an hour, showing absolutely no signs of returning back to a life of crime. These examples just run over and over again. EPA Brownfields Job Training Program is a true demonstration of partnership between the people, the government, and the business community. The EPA project works. Thank you.
Grant, questions here? If I may, Bill Klinger.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question is this: I come from Pennsylvania, which has a lot of brownfields in the state, more than we really need. And a couple of years ago, we did, this panel awarded Pennsylvania's Brownfield Redevelopment Program. How does this program differ? What additional element do you bring to the table over and above what some of the states have been doing in terms of brownfield redevelopment?
The states have been doing a lot of the site assessment work, and that was the original focus of the EPA program, going out and assessing the contamination at sites. What we've done is at each and every turn, every time we've met the next challenge, we've added to our program. So, for example, the job training program. The states can do the assessment, but they need the trained workers to do the cleanups. The revolving loan fund, state after state came to us and said, boy, we got a developer interested in redeveloping that site, but we can't get the bank to lend the money. So we now provide up to $500,000 to eligible states, to eligible communities. They loan the money out, they get it paid back, they can loan it out again. And so what our program has really done is, I think, gone far beyond what the states are doing. They're an important part of this effort, but we're bringing resources, we're bringing the individuals with the skills, we're bringing all of the other federal agencies to the job. Site assessment is just the first step in the process.
Do we correctly understand then that a state like Pennsylvania started, and some of these states started the brownfields effort of this kind, and you took it up to the national level and then built upon it?
We actually all sort of started together. We started awarding our site assessments back in '93. There were a few states that had gone out and tried to do some site assessments, but I think it would be fair to say that there was a general sense out there. We were hearing from mayors, we were hearing from governors, that someone needed to be looking at these sites, and state environmental agencies, EPA, sort of all got the idea to start looking at them. We then have been growing our program ever since, and I'll tell you, we're about to meet the next challenge we just encountered, which are gas stations. Another unintended consequence, which is a good law to close down gas stations where tanks are leaking. That's a good thing because it jeopardizes our drinking water supplies. But the problem is a lot of these tanks and these stations have been abandoned, and cities can't deal with it. So now we're going to expand the Brownfields program to actually start to pick up the tanks. So what we're able to do is go much more broadly than what any of the individual state programs have been able to do.
Susan.
Looking at the program that you're describing has a variety of activities involved in it, and I guess my question is related to the relative importance of each. Part of this is the delisting of, 30,000 sites that had previously been Superfund sites, efforts to limit legal liability for developers. You mentioned the cleanup fund, the job training aspect. If you were to list, sort of in order of significance, those steps, those aspects of the program, how would you rank order them?
Well, let me step back. What we're trying to do is weave the whole cloth of a healthy community, of a neighborhood with hope, a neighborhood with future. And each of those strings has to come together to create that future, to create that hope. And for some communities, it may well be that the revolving loan fund is the most important thing. For other communities, like the community Duane spoke about, training people may be the most important activity. What I would really say to you all, it's not What I say is most important in all of those lists of activities, it's what the individual community would say, and we have such an array of tools we can now provide through this program that each community chooses the sort of the menu from the menu, the recipe that is right for them. You know, I do want to just reiterate one point. We did all of this, and we're a regulatory agency, and you guys know what that means, without a single new law. Congress never gave us a new law to do this, and we did it without a single rule or regulation because we want it to stay dynamic. We want it to be responsive to the needs of the individual communities. No two communities are the same, their past or their future.
Lee Shore, did you have a question?
I wanted to ask if you had a theory about why it was possible for you to really take a very different stance as a federal agency toward local communities, where the hallmark of which was flexibility and listening and responding differently to different needs of different communities. What made it possible for the EPA to act in this way, which I think you would agree is not the typical federal agency stance?
I think two things made it possible. One is the people at EPA. We're 18,000 people, we're $7 billion, but you know, this is only 60 or 70 people. It's a relatively small program, but man, did they believe in what they were doing, and they just weren't going to take no for an answer. It's a relatively small dollar amount for us. We spend about $85 million a year, but they just weren't going to take no. I think the second point, I think this is really important, is the number of mayors and local communities who came to me, who came to the agency and said, you know what, there's an economic boom going on in this country, and it is going to pass us by. You have to help us. And we realized that we could actually get to where we want it to be, which is cleaned up sites, by leveraging available market resources, by saying, yeah, you know, people want to develop in more and more places. Let's make these sites attractive.
Carol Browner and Duane Jones, thank you both very much.